Hi everybody, it's Courtney. I'm here with another video for Trinity Stamps. Today we're going to be talking about getting the most out of your stamp sets. So I'm going to be using the Winter Botanical stamp set as well as one of the sentiments from the Let Love Grow. And I'm just going to be using one of the images from the Winter Botanical stamp set. We spend a lot of money on crafting supplies and stamps and things like that. So I like to kind of go through and maybe use things, even if it's just one image, in order to create something that maybe wasn't intended. So I'm starting off with a piece of dark gray cardstock here, and this is cut down to just a little bit smaller than an A2 size note card. And I'm going to start off with my sentiment first. And I'm stamping this with my Versamark ink. I did treat my panel there with my anti-static tool because we are going to be doing a whole lot of heat embossing. So I stamped that with my Versamark. Then I'm going to be working on a scrap piece of paper here because I'm going to kind of be stamping off my panel a little bit. Just going to take this one stamp from the Winter Botanical stamp set, and I'm just going to start stamping around the edges of all four sides of the card panel. I'm just trying to be careful not to overlap. If you do, it's really not a big deal. We can always fix that up later. And working on such a dark piece of cardstock, I can certainly see where I've stamped with the Versamark. If you're working on a piece of white or just a very light color, you may have to kind of emboss or at least sprinkle on that embossing powder as you go, just so that you can see where you've stamped. But being I used such a dark color here, I didn't have any problem at all. Now I'm trying to twist and turn my cardstock here with just the very edges of it so that I don't get any fingerprints. Being I'm working with this acrylic black, my fingers are a little bit sticky, so I don't want my embossing powder to stick to places that I don't want it to, even though that didn't really work out too well. So once I have all of my stamping done, I will go ahead and sprinkle on my white embossing powder over the entire panel, including the sentiment. And you'll see here that I definitely did have some areas where my embossing powder stuck to places it shouldn't have, or I didn't want it to anyway, especially in the lower left-hand corner. You can see it's pretty smudgy down there. So what I'll do is before I heat set this, I'll take a dry paintbrush and kind of just move around the powder in areas that I don't want it to be in and just blow that off. I don't want to sweep it off because I have so much embossing powder on this panel that I was afraid that I was going to remove more than I wanted to. Now it still looks a little bit messy. I wasn't able to get it all off just because these are teeny tiny areas between these little branches, but I was, for the most part, able to get most of that off. Once that was done, I will go ahead and heat set the entire panel, and you'll also see that there are certain areas where I didn't get a great impression, and it's probably because my Versamark pad desperately needs re-inking or replacement. So that was my fault. So if you're using white embossing powder, and you've probably all had this happen where it's not a smooth finish once you heat set it, you can fix those little gaps that you may have, especially with a solid image, with a white gel pen. So I'm just trying to scrape off some of this stray embossing powder. That didn't work. So I just moved on. And like I said, I'll take my white gel pen and just go over some of the areas where it was kind of rough and bumpy, and I could see the cardstock through the image itself where I didn't want it to. You will want to make sure that your white gel pen is completely dry before you handle your panel. Again, I didn't because, as you all know, I'm very impatient. So I did have a little bit of smearing from the white gel pen. I was able to carefully take my sand eraser and get all of that off before I moved on to the next step. So I did adhere this flat to an A2 size top folding note card with my Tombow Mono Multi Glue, and I'm just adhering this flat. Then in order to add a little bit of color and more dimension, I'm going to take some Nuvo drops, and I'm going to be using two different color pinks here, and I will link the colors below because I don't have them in front of me and I can't remember the names. And I'm also going to be using the white enamel dots. And this is just because I don't have the white Nuvo drops. So I'm going to start off with this dark pink color, and I have a little scrap piece of paper that I'll squeeze a little bit of this out, make sure there's no air bubbles before I bring this to my card. And also it kind of just gets this flowing because I want teeny tiny drops here. I don't want it to spread too much. So I'll go in and fill in just kind of random these little circles, I guess. I think maybe they're supposed to be berries, but I'm not even squeezing the bottle too much. Once I have this flowing, I'm kind of just steadily holding it and letting it seep out because I'm just putting a real teeny tiny dot. Carefully turning my paper each time because I don't want to put my hand in or my fingers in the wet Nuvo drops. Because we're using such a little amount here, and I'm telling you, these dots are really tiny, they will dry fairly quickly. And I do let it dry just a little bit before I'll move on to my next color, because if you put the Nuvo drops or enamel accents next to one another when they are still wet, they will kind of merge together and you won't have two dots anymore. You'll just kind of have a puddle of two different colors. So you will want to make sure that it is a little bit dry, maybe like 10 or 15 minutes before you move on to the next color. And I don't really have any rhyme or reason for which ones I'm choosing. I'm just kind of randomly putting them down. The Nuvo drops do not spread as much as the enamel accents, I find. So I saved the enamel accents for last and did the Nuvo drops first. So once I had the darkest color down, we'll move on to this light pink. And I'm pretty much doing the same thing, squeezing a little bit of this out onto my scrap piece of paper, getting this flowing a little bit so I don't squeeze the bottle too much and add too much where I don't want it to be. And then just, again, putting this in random areas. I am choosing little dots where it's not too close to the ones we've already put down, because this time I didn't wait. I went right in. But I don't want them to blend together. So once my light pink was down, I did put my panel aside to dry for about 15 or 20 minutes. And I forgot to press record, but I went over the remaining dots with the white enamel accents. And that is the card for today. Very quick, very clean and simple, but just take a look at your stamp set, see what you got, see what you can make with maybe just one or two images. Thanks so much for stopping by, guys. Have a great day. Bye.